Welcome back to NBA Stories. Today we dive into the legend of Shaquille O'Neal and ask a simple question: why was he such an unstoppable physical monster? When you talk about pure physical dominance in basketball history, Shaq is the first name that comes to mind. He was not just big, he was big with purpose. 7'1", over 320 pounds in his prime, and yet he moved with surprising quickness and coordination for someone of that size. From the moment he entered the NBA, Shaq changed the geometry of the court. Defenses had to shrink instantly whenever he caught the ball near the paint. Help defenders abandon shooters. Coaches changed their game plans just to survive his presence inside. Shaq's body was a weapon, but it was the way he used it that made him terrifying. He had explosive first steps for a center. He could catch the ball, make one powerful dribble, and you were already under the rim. He had a low center of gravity for someone that tall, making it very hard to push him off his spots. Watch his post-ups, and you see a pattern. One bump, space created. Second bump, the defender retreats or loses balance. Third bump, the defender is practically under the basket, and Shaq is already lifting for a dunk. It was like being hit by a truck 3 times in 3 seconds. Shaq wasn't just heavy, he was strong in a way that looked unfair. He snapped backboards early in his career in Orlando. He broke entire basket supports, not by accident, but through sheer force of his dunks. That is not just size. That is violent power being unleashed again and again. His hands were huge, and his grip on the ball was terrifying for defenders. He could palm the ball, swing it away from reaching arms, and still maintain control. He used his shoulders like weapons. He used his hips and legs to seal defenders miserably behind him. Shaq understood positioning at an elite level. He would carve out real estate in the paint before the ball even arrived. Once he established that deep position, the possession was almost over. You could foul him, you could pray he missed, but you were not stopping the shot from going up at the rim. He was also surprisingly quick for his size in transition. People remember the dunks, but not always how he got them. In his Orlando and early Lakers years, he ran the floor like a freight train. If his guards pushed the ball, Shaq could arrive as a trailer, catching the ball at full speed. Meeting him at the rim in those moments was a bad career decision. The psychological impact of Shaq was just as real as the physical impact. Teams came into games already thinking about how to survive him. Centers knew they would absorb 48 minutes of body blows. Coaches knew their big men were going to be in foul trouble. The fear factor was a part of his dominance. There is a reason so many big men look smaller next to Shaq. He made legitimate 7-footers look like power forwards. Even strong defenders like Dikembe Mutombo or Alonzo Mourning struggled to hold their ground. They were great players, but Shaq made them look human. He dragged them under the rim and finished anyway. Shaq's physical dominance forced the league to adapt. Rules around illegal defense in zones, defensive 3 seconds, and the way teams doubled the post all evolved while he played. He was such a gravitational force that the league's strategy slowly shifted outward. Teams wanted stretch bigs just to pull big defenders away from him. On offense, Shaq's game was built around power, but it also had touch. He had a soft hook shot over his left shoulder. He could finish with either hand. He had a little running hook, a flip shot, and a feathery touch on the glass for someone so brutal around the rim. His footwork was underrated. He was not Hakeem Olajuwon with the ballet-style spins and counters, but Shaq had effective, compact moves, drop steps, jump hooks, quick spins baseline. He did not need 10 moves when 2 moves at his size were already unstoppable. Shaq's presence opened everything for his teammates. On the Lakers, shooters like Robert Horry, Derek Fisher, and Rick Fox thrived on open looks. Kobe Bryant could attack a less crowded lane because 2 or 3 defenders were glued to Shaq. Defenses could not cover both the post and the perimeter at the same time. When Shaq got the ball, the help came instantly. Double teams, triple teams sometimes. The moment the ball touched his hands, you saw a swarm. He learned to pass out of those crowds. He found cutters and spot-up shooters, and that made him not just a scorer, but an offensive engine. The hack-a-Shaq strategy is one of the clearest signs of how unstoppable he was. Teams chose to foul him intentionally, again and again, because they feared what would happen if he got normal touches. Imagine that. You are so dominant that the opponent is willing to give you free throws all night rather than live with you taking natural shots. It was ugly basketball, but it was a compliment in disguise. Yes, Shaq was a poor free throw shooter. That was his biggest weakness. But even that didn't fully neutralize his value. He still drew tons of fouls. He wore out opposing bigs mentally and physically. He got teams into the penalty early, giving his teammates easy trips to the line. On defense, Shaq's physical presence closed off the paint. He was not always the most active pick and roll defender, especially in later years, but when he committed, he was a massive obstacle. Guards thought twice before driving all the way to the rim. He altered shots simply by standing there with his arms up. In his prime, Shaq had good timing as a shot blocker. He was not a pure shot blocking specialist like Mutombo, but he could swat shots with ease when engaged. More importantly, he was an elite space eater. He controlled defensive rebounds and ended possessions. His size erased second chance opportunities. When we talk about Shaq as a physical monster, we're not just describing his body. We are describing his entire impact on the game. He changed how teams drafted. He changed which lineups coaches could trust. He forced the league to think about size and strength in a new dimension. Think about today's NBA. Spacing, three-pointers, switching defenses. Now imagine Shaq in that context, surrounded by 4 shooters on the perimeter, no hand checking on the outside, defenders unable to camp in the paint because of defensive 3 seconds. Every time he touched the ball near the restricted area, it would be a bucket or a foul. His style may not have been pretty in the classic sense, but there was a strange beauty in that destruction. Post entry, back down again. Rim shakes, the crowd roars. The defender looks at the referee begging for help that never comes. Emotionally, watching Shaq in his prime felt like watching a natural disaster. You knew what was coming, but you could not do anything about it. There was a sense of helplessness from opponents that translated through the screen. You could feel the impact with every dunk. You could hear the fear in the commentators' voices when he caught the ball deep. This is the emphatic truth about Shaquille O'Neal. He made grown men, professional athletes, world-class defenders look like props in his personal highlight reel. You saw players getting out of the way at the last second. You saw defenders absorb the contact and then look shaken for the next few possessions. You saw the way entire arenas tilted emotionally when he got rolling. It felt unfair, overwhelming, almost cruel. That emotional shockwave is part of why fans still talk about his dominance. With a mix of awe and disbelief, some critics argue that Shaq relied too much on his size. They say he was not as skilled as some other all-time greats. But skill is not just about fancy dribbles or fadeaway jumpers. Skill is how effectively you use what you have. Shaq knew his strengths, and he maximized them. He did not pretend to be a stretch big. He knew that the paint was his kingdom, and he ruled it without apology. What made him even scarier was that in his peak years, he stayed in good enough shape to maintain that explosion. He could play heavy minutes. He could dominate for long stretches. He carried his team in the playoffs, especially in those early 2000s Lakers runs. Night after night, series after series, opponents knew they had to solve the Shaq problem first. In the 2000 playoffs especially, Shaq was on a historic tear. He destroyed single coverage. He shattered double teams. He lived at the rim and on the foul line. He put up monster numbers and still seemed like he could do more. That level of dominance is rare even among the legends. Another part of Shaq's power was his personality. He was playful. He joked. He danced. But under that, humor was a competitive giant. When it mattered, he wanted to crush you. He wanted to impose his will, physically and psychologically. Teammates fed off that presence. They knew that no one in the league could match their big man's force inside. Coaches built entire offensive systems around him. Even late in his career, when his athleticism declined, his size alone still demanded respect. If you look at the history of basketball, there are many types of greatness. Skill-based greatness, IQ-based greatness, two-way versatility. Shaq represents almost the purest form of physical dominance the league has ever seen. He is the answer to the question. What happens if you combine massive size with enough agility, touch, timing, and aggression? His legacy is visible when we compare modern bigs. We talk about centers who can shoot threes. We talk about centers who can switch onto guards. But we also quietly know that none of them impose fear the way Shaq did in the paint. He is a reference point. He is the standard for overpowering post play. People sometimes forget how much preparation it took just to survive 48 minutes of Shaq. Centers needed extra ice after games. Training staffs planned for foul trouble scenarios. Backup bigs knew they might need to sacrifice their bodies for a few minutes just to give the starter a break. It was not just a game, it was a physical battle. When Shaq retired, the league lost that specific kind of interior violence. The game evolved toward finesse and spacing. But the memory of Shaq tearing down rims and burying defenders under his weight still lingers. You hear younger fans ask if anyone today is as physically dominant as Shaq. The honest answer is no, at least not in that exact overwhelming way. Shaquille O'Neal was an unstoppable physical monster because he combined extraordinary size with functional athleticism, powerful technique, and a ruthless mindset. He turned the paint into his personal fortress. He changed game plans, careers, and maybe even the direction of the sport itself. You could scheme around him, you could foul him, you could double him, but you could never really stop him at his best. And that is why, when we look back at NBA history, Shaq stands as one of the most fearsome forces the game has ever seen. Not just a star, not just a champion, but a moving, living nightmare for anyone assigned to guard him. Thank you for watching this episode of NBA Stories. If you enjoyed diving into the unstoppable power of Shaquille O'Neal, make sure to hit that like button. Share this video with other basketball fans who still remember Shaq tearing down rims and breaking the game. Drop a comment below and tell us your favorite Shaq moment or which legend you want us to cover next. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another story from NBA Stories. Thank you for watching, and well, see you in the next video.